I'll just start by talking a little bit about kind of my history with this topic of, the title of my presentation is Teaching and Learning During a Pandemic and how open educational resources can help. So obviously my kind of full-time position here at the college is as a librarian. So like I said, I recently became chair of the library, and my kind of history with this topic started soon after I came to Triton and stepped into my role as a librarian, and was introduced to open educational resources kind of through my discipline, right through the world of library and information science, and have been involved in introducing other faculty to and educating faculty on OER for most of my time here at Triton. So my interest in this topic really stemmed from, just my role, right, as a librarian here at Triton, and frequently getting asked the question, how can I access my textbook? Can you help me find my textbook? But more importantly, right, questions from our students and our student population of, it's week 1 or 2 of the semester, my financial aid hasn't come in yet, right? I don't have access to the textbook. I don't have the money to buy the textbook. Halfway through the semester, right, I never purchased my textbook and I need access to it. And then also just conversations with students about kind of the financial burden of learning materials was kind of what kicked off kind of my interest in this topic. And so kind of today, what I would like to talk about, that some of these issues that have just been, highlighted in our current learning environment, right, during the pandemic, when we've kind of pivoted, right, really quickly to online learning, and kind of how open education resources, or OER, as faculty in these variety of disciplines, how OER can either help supplement, right, course material in your classroom, or even potentially replace traditional textbooks or traditional publisher content in your classroom. We'll talk a little bit more about that later, but I really want to encourage you to think of this as a spectrum, right? It's not necessarily throwing out your textbook and adopting an open one, although it totally could. But hopefully you'll see as we go through kind of our content today how this really is a spectrum, and how OER can help support learning in a variety of classrooms, whether it's fully online, right, an ERL class, or face-to-face courses as well. So if you know me, and I'm big on learning outcomes, and so kind of as a result of today, what I hope that you'll be able to do is to define open educational resources. So what is OER? Be able to search for discipline-specific resources, and again, I love that we have a variety of disciplines represented here, and to be able to talk through that a little bit. And then also determine the best way to incorporate OER, again, in your courses, right? So discipline specific, what it looks like to incorporate OER in your courses, and then also adapt to a variety of formats. So whether you're teaching fully online, an ERL course, or face-to-face courses as well, whether that's this semester or potentially looking towards the future. Now, just as kind of part of my introduction to, I am happy to pause at any point to chat. So if you have any questions, please feel free to put them in the chat box. I'll be monitoring the chat box here. Also, you can use the little raise your hand icon at the bottom of the screen, or just unmute your mic and jump in. It does not bother me at all. So please feel free if you've any questions at any point as we go through these slides, but jump in. But of course, I'll save time at the end for questions, and we can talk through that as well. So we'll kind of start off with the basics, right? What are open educational resources, or as they're frequently referred to, OER? What are they? So when we talk about open educational resources, or OER, this is the definition from the Hewlett Foundation, but open educational resources are teaching, learning, and research resources that either reside in the public domain, and we'll talk about what that means, or have been released under intellectual property license that permit their free use and repurposing by others. And then this definition goes on to share that they can include, although we may think of OER as textbooks, they can include full courses, full online courses, any type of course material, modules. They can be full textbooks, streaming videos, tests, software, or really any other type of learning material that could be used in a course. So keeping that definition in mind, open educational resources are, it's really broad definition of what that could contain. Typically these conversations tend to move towards textbooks, but again, keeping in mind that the definition for open educational resources is really broad, does include open textbook, but not necessarily the only type of learning material. So again, example of what an OER is. An example of OER include, but again, not limited to, full courses, course material, content modules, learning objects, even especially with the increase in 3D printing, right? A lot of that can also be considered OER, different collections of materials. There's open access journals. So many of you may be familiar with those in your discipline, but journals that are not paid subscription but are open access. Again, textbooks, software. So a large range of materials that can be included under OER, and hopefully in your mind you're already thinking about within your discipline, within your subject area, within the content that you teach in your course, what potentially might be the most useful to you as you think of what OER you could begin to incorporate in your classrooms, whether that be a full course, whether that be a textbook, whether that be software or some type of learning object. And again, we'll talk more about discipline specific in just a few moments. But that's an example of what we include when we talk about open educational resources. Now, this is where, as a librarian, I nerd out, right, defining our terms and talking about, what are these different terms that we use when we're describing learning materials. So just briefly wanted to go through these terms and kind of clarify what we're talking about when we use them. Now, when we say the word open, right, an open resource, an open educational resource, by definition, right, when we're talking about open resources, they're free to share, adapt, or modify. That is what is truly an open educational resource. When we say open, that means you can use, you can share, you can adapt, edit, modify that resource. Now we're going to talk about some limits to that, but that's what a truly open educational resource means. Now, when we talk about a free resource, there's a lot of things that are free to access, right? We know this from Google. We know this from, I'm sure, resources that your students find or that you even potentially have looked at or used. A lot is available freely online, but because it's free, it's not necessarily, you're not necessarily allowed to share, adapt, or modify. Now, fair use is the term that we use to talk about a copyright. It's basically an argument under copyright law where fair use permits limited use of material for educational purposes without requiring permission from the copyright holder. Depending on the educational institution, the librarian that you speak to, right, depending on a person's stance, there could be a more conservative interpretation of fair use or maybe a more liberal interpretation of fair use. However, what it ultimately comes down to is in U.S. copyright law, there is some limited use of material for educational purposes to use in the classroom. And so when we talk about fair use, that's what we're talking about, is that exception under copyright law. Now, public domain are works that are publicly available because intellectual property rights have been expired or have been forfeited. So in the public domain, frequently a lot of government documents fall into the public domain. If they're created with tax dollars, they are frequently then released into the public domain. So a lot of government documents fall into the public domain. Also, at this point, it's the 1920s. If anything was created before 1920s in U.S. copyright law, that falls into the public domain. After the 1920s, it can get a little bit tricky depending on when the author has passed and a variety of other considerations, but things that were created before the 1920s fall into the public domain. And again, those are can be used because their copyright has either been expired or has forfeited. And then finally, when we talk about copyright or all rights reserved, this is when the copyright holder reserves or holds for their own use all of the rights provided by copyright law. And this almost never has to be explicitly stated, right? The default is that the copyright holder reserves all of their rights. And so even if something does not say all rights reserved or does not publish that there is a copyright, the default is that the copyright holder reserves their copyright on that learning material. So I'm going to pause there for just a moment. Do you have any questions here on either the definition of open materials or any of these other terms that we may encounter or frequently come across when talking about open materials or copyrighted materials? Yeah, Dave.
Yeah, hi, Lauren. Years ago, when we developed some new courses over in horticulture, we made a lot of use of open source materials, and which was a great experience for me. And one of the questions I've got is any publication, we use a lot of like extension service resources related to horticulture because there's so many of them, like
right.
With like insect disease control, that sort of thing. Are
Sure.
those kind of, because they're made by public institutions, are they just generally accepted as open source?
So I would say I would have to look at the specific resource, but in my knowledge, I would say no, not necessarily. So again, the default is always full copyright for the author unless that right has been explicitly given up. So it would probably say, depending on the type of material, somewhere in the acknowledgments or somewhere documented, it should say explicitly that there is a permission other than full copyright. So that might be something like individual examples like that would be something that I could definitely help you with because I can help kind of research that and track that down. But I would say that no matter who creates it, unless it's a government site, but again, that's not all, mostly federal, not necessarily state. But the default, I would say, is assume it has a copyright holder unless they've explicitly given permission.
Okay.
But if you have further questions on like specific resources, like ones that you're using and you want to make sure, I have that on a slide coming up, but chat with one of us, chat with a librarian, we can definitely help you chase it down.
Thank you.
Yeah, no, great question. Any other questions on these terms or the definition of open educational resources?
Lauren, I just had one question.
Yeah.
I found a play that I'm looking to use for spring, and it's on a university website, and the contact person's link is broke, so there's no way for me to get a hold of it, and it's not a famous person. It's a very local one to that university's newspaper.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you go onto the website, it's a full PDF that anybody can download and read. What do you think?
Great question. I think specifically that you should try to chase the person down in a different way.
Okay, yeah, that's what I was thinking, but it's just like every link to this site, and it's supposed to be for a class, which is even weirder. Every link, it comes back with the mailer demon thing, but okay.
Interesting. So if you can't chase them down, the next best thing would not be to download the PDF and put it into your Blackboard shell, but would be to include the link to the PDF that is hosted by that university.
Excellent.
So technically, this is where we can get real nitty-gritty with this fun stuff, is unless you made a copy, there is no copyright. Okay. So if you are linking right to a site, you're not making a copy, you're sharing the link, so you're not violating copyright.
All right, thank you.
Does that make sense? Yeah.
It totally does.
And I feel more comfortable with that because a university where that person works is hosting it. If it was some random link to Google and it's like maybe a student uploaded it at some point, I would not recommend it. But because it's being held by the university and purportedly the faculty member has control over that, that's why I would feel comfortable suggesting that for you. But I would say try to chase them down.
All right, I will. Thank you.
Great. I love that we came prepared with questions and examples. This is excellent. Okay, so let's move on and kind of talk about the types of licenses, right? So we have this image at the top where kind of on my screen, far left, we see all rights reserved, which is full copyright. And there is this spectrum before we get to the public domain, which is, again, kind of open, right, free to use. So all rights reserved, we have on one side, we're like public domain, free for all on the other, right? So there is this kind of spectrum of permissions that were developed by using Creative Commons licenses. So when we talk about open educational resources, these Creative Commons licenses are really important. It allows authors, faculty members like yourself, right, if you create a workbook or you published it or you had developed a textbook or you want to use other material, it allows authors to give permission that is less restrictive than full copyright, but more restrictive than public domain, and the author still retains full rights. So, for example, if you published a textbook under full copyright, no one's allowed to use it unless they pay you, right? So as an author, you have to purchase the textbook, then they can use it. And there's a lot of restrictions around sharing that content because you retain full rights. Now, if you as an author were to publish your workbook or your textbook under a Creative Commons license, you get to choose where on the spectrum you want your permissions. So for example, you still retain all rights to your work, it's still your content, but these different licenses are more or less restrictive. For example, on the far left, right next to all rights reserved or full copyright, you can tell users that you can use this textbook, but you have to give me attribution, you can't sell it, and you can't edit it. It has to be an alike textbook. If you're going to share it with your students, you have to give me credit, you can't sell it for profit, and you have to keep it in its current form. Again, moving to the right, you would get less restrictive. Closest to the public domain, you just have to give me attribution and you can do whatever you'd like with it. You can edit it, you can modify it, you can take some chapters out, you can add some chapters, you can change up the order of the chapters, you can edit, you can do whatever you would like. You just somewhere on the document, you have to give me credit. So I'm not going to go into a full description of what all of these licenses are. I included the link to the Creative Commons website where you would be, and I can share these slides with you guys after the presentation. You can see the full list of descriptions. But when you're searching for open educational materials, this is what kind of you will encounter. You're rarely going to see right under OER any full copyright, but you will see a variety of Creative Commons restrictions. And these will tell you what you can do with that material. You can edit, right? You can change things up. You can share it with your students openly, just with what level of restrictions. So if you're interested in learning more, again, I would encourage you, I can point to some resources later in the presentation of where you can learn more, where you can read more and find more. But I think the key thing here is just to know that the Creative Commons license is the spectrum in between where it allows you to do a lot with these learning materials, a lot more than traditional copyrighted material. So I'll pause there for just a moment. Are there any questions on this slide where we talk about Creative Commons licenses? Okay, looks like we're ready to move on. Okay, so pop quiz for you all. All right, so you can vote by using the little raise your hand icon at the bottom. Does free mean open? If you think yes, go ahead and click on the raise your hand button at the bottom. Does free mean open? Ooh, Looks like everyone, oh, Monroe says yes, or hopefully that's not a question. So does free mean open? Monroe says yes. Everyone else says no. Okay, one more question for your pop quiz. Does open mean free? Use the little raise your hand icon at the bottom if you think open means free. All right, we're no's on both. Okay, here is my answer. It depends, which is always a fun answer, right? So overall, I would say that free does not mean open, right? So like I said before, there's a lot of free stuff on the internet. You can freely access it. It doesn't mean that it's open or available to use. Remember, unless the author explicitly gives up their copyright using a Creative Commons license or putting it into the public domain, the author reserves full copyright and it can't be used without permission or payment. So free does not necessarily mean open. Now, open does mean free to use, especially when you're talking about students and faculty. But I do like to make the point that it doesn't mean that it's free to create, right? So, specifically the Department of Education over the last 10, 12 years has put billions of dollars into federal grants. Dave, I know that the horticulture program that developed developed online courses using open educational resources. It started with a TACT grant from the Department of Labor. So even Triton courses have benefited from this. The Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, Hewlett Packard Foundation. So much money has been poured into grants and paying faculty and other individuals to create these resources to then release them under Creative Commons licenses. So I will say open does mean free to use, right, for students and faculty, but doesn't mean that they are created for free. And lots of money has been put into creating accessible and quality materials for students and faculty. Jackie, it looks like you had a question. Was that a hand raised as a question, or was that like a delayed voting hand?
I'm sorry, I was on mute.
No,
so I'm not real savvy on this, so I might be kind of mixing up words. But so I've used things such as, what is it, study.com maybe, that are that seem to be open and free in the beginning, but then after some time, the students are asked to open up subscription or something like that. So what would that be considered? Am I saying it right? I don't know.
Yeah, so it depends. If the publisher, depending, I'm not as familiar with like study.com, but if they are, I would say that it is a tactic, right, to offer free and open materials to then kind of encourage a subscription later. Okay. I think it would depend on the specific resource. Again, just because it's free doesn't mean it's open, but I wouldn't say it's an uncommon strategy to offer free and open to then later try to loop you into some kind of subscription. That's not uncommon. So if you can find what you need outside of the subscription, I feel like that could be helpful. Okay. Yeah, great question.
Thank you.
Yeah, and excellent use of terminology.
Okay.
Anyway, so I think that's a point that I like to make is, this is not necessarily just random material out on the internet, right? There's a lot of peer review, high quality, great resources that are available as open educational resources, often because it was grant money that was offered to create them, and one of the stipulations of the grant was that it was then that resource was then going to be offered as an open resource. So again, lots of high quality, like really, really great material across a variety of disciplines for you to use. So let's get into, now we've kind of talked about definitions and terms and where these come from. Let's talk about how you can search for OER. And so I'm going to highlight a few things here. Of course, at the top, we have a Triton College library guide. I'm going to go ahead and put the URL into the chat box for you. And so I'm going to go ahead and share that, and you can feel free to, click on it now or check it out later. Again, I'm going to share my slides, which have all of these linked, but let me go ahead and put this into the chat box for you. It's library.triton.edu/OER. And this is a guide that covers a lot of the material that we talked about today, but it also shares, a lot of links and places to head for different types of material. So I'm going to go ahead actually and share my screen with you. And I want to give you a little bit of an overview of what this guide looks like. So if you follow the link, so library.triton.edu/OER, you're going to land on this guide. So this guide, again, includes a lot of links, a lot of resources for open educational resources, gives an overview of some of the things that we've talked about already, and goes into the types of licenses, but then goes into where to search for different types of resources. For example, audio, video, and images gives you a lot of great information here. I'm going to highlight the course content. When you click on the course content here, there are links to different OER repositories, open access journals, and you can click in even further to choose, I want to look at lists of open textbooks. So these are curated resources where you can find open textbooks. And then there's also a tab here for where to find different course materials. And you can see that there are a variety that have a lot of different disciplines listed here as well. And then there's also resources where you can find different discipline-specific resources as well. So just wanted to show you that guide. I'm going to go ahead and share my PowerPoint again. But just wanted to show you that guide, and that there are lots of different places where you can head to find open educational resources, lots of different repositories, lots of different search engines and places where you can find open educational resources. So that guide is one of them. In just a moment, I'll show you the resources by discipline as well. There's also, again, large search engines like Creative Commons. Another great one is the Open Textbook Library. That's a great place to head as well. And again, tons and tons and tons of information. Now, I will say that in my work with faculty, one of the ways that I've found my role to be the most useful is to go from an ocean of information and be able to kind of shrink it down to like, I don't know, like a lake or a pond of information that's going to be the most helpful to you. So pointing out all of these repositories, these open textbooks libraries, it can be great to kind of click on and explore and see how much there is for maybe 15 or 20 minutes, but then I recognize that it gets very overwhelming very quickly. So that's also why I listed the Triton College librarians as helpful resources, because we can kind of take all of the open resources that are out there and start to narrow it down and kind of point you in the direction of what would be the most helpful for you, not only for your discipline, but also what you're looking for, recognizing that not everyone's going to be looking for the same thing, right? Even in this group, one of you might be thinking, yeah, I'm ready to, ditch my publisher textbook. I want to find an open textbook that would be helpful for my students and meet my course outcomes. Great, right? But then you also might just be looking for some supplementary material, right? And other things to kind of help support your students in this kind of fully online environment that we're finding ourselves. And so maybe there are students you've encountered that can't purchase the textbook, but maybe you can support them with, a chapter from an OER textbook that would help them in place of, not being able to purchase the textbook. Or maybe there's some handouts, right, or PowerPoints that you can kind of point to that could be helpful, and you can feel good about sharing this open material with them, and they can get the support that they need and be able to access those materials on day one of your course. So there's, recognizing there's a wide variety of needs in terms of your discipline, your content area, but also you as a faculty member and your pedagogical approach. And so that's why I kind of advocate using us, right, as resources where we can be helpful in narrowing down what's going to be the most beneficial information for you and point you in that right direction. So I'm going to pause there for just a moment. Are there any questions on that piece? I'm going to go ahead and share one more guide that I would like to, when you click on the resources by discipline, I'm going to show you guys one more resource. But until then, if there's any questions, please let me know. So I'm going to go ahead and share another guide that we have available, and it has a lot of overlapping resources from the Open Educational Resources Guide. But one thing I would like to highlight here is I linked to it in the PowerPoint, so you can get directly here, is our Resources by Discipline tab. And this screen, or kind of this tab, has organized a lot of these resources that you could find in repositories by discipline or by subject area. So in my work with faculty over the last few years, as I've had conversations, as I talked about seeing your syllabus, seeing your course outline, seeing what your course outcomes are, and helped find material to match that. I've also created this resource by discipline kind of list, or these different tabs. So if you click through by discipline, you'll see that there are resources that either other faculty here at Triton have found helpful, or just in my research I've found helpful as well. So I've listed them here. So again, going from kind of that larger ocean of information down to a little bit smaller of a pool. And so this is a resources by discipline that, if the repositories seem overwhelming, then maybe some of these resources by discipline lists can be a little bit more helpful when you are thinking about maybe starting off and kind of checking out what might be available for your discipline. So again, in your in the PowerPoint slides, I've linked directly to it, but I can also go ahead, I'm going to put this in the chat box as well. But if you are interested in kind of seeing what might be available in your subject area, these are by no means comprehensive. I've linked to all of these, so this is just kind of what I've found helpful in my own research. But just know that that's available to you as well if you would like to kind of check out what's in your subject area without necessarily diving into the entire ocean of OER. So I've went ahead and linked that there. So I'm going to go back to my PowerPoint. I'm wrapping up on the slides here, and then hopefully there'll be a few minutes for us to answer questions and talk a little bit further depending on your subject area. So we talked about some of the resources and tools that are available to you, and so I kind of want to just wrap up with talking about, what is the best fit for your course, right? How can open educational resources and adopting open educational resources best fit your course material, and best support your students, this spring semester? So I definitely want to emphasize, kind of how I highlighted before, that just one size does not fit all, right? Sitting here, you may want to incorporate ancillary materials, or you may want to adopt an open textbook, right? You may want to embed institutional resources. We haven't even touched on these, but one way, I know Rebecca is already doing this, the library offers information in a variety of formats. For example, we have subscriptions to journal articles, newspaper articles, magazine articles, streaming media. You can stream movies and documentaries for your course and embed them into your Blackboard shell. And these aren't technically open resources, but the institution takes on the cost, right? The library pays for these subscriptions, so you and your students have free access as students and faculty here at Triton. So you could just be looking to embed, right, some no cost to the student resources into your course, or you may want to, do a fully open resource as well. You may be interested in creating a YouTube video, which I'm sure many of you have done way more of these than you thought previously this semester. You may want to create a YouTube video, create your own learning material, or you might want to add a reading from the public domain. So all of these kind of fit under this this effort to offer students more accessible resources in your classroom. And so not one size does not fit all, right? Doesn't necessarily mean you have to adopt a fully open textbook. It could be a variety of these different efforts that could help support your students. So I just wanted to offer that as you can take a small step, right, of just adding worksheets or a PowerPoint or other materials to really support your students. Adding readings that are more current, that's definitely an effort as well. So this could take a lot of different shapes or forms in your course when you think about how OER could help you in the spring. Now, as I've already spoken about a little bit, I'm clearly coming at this with my own position and my own bias, but I think librarians can be super helpful in this effort. So, like I said, I have walked faculty through and supported faculty through any of those different pieces. So from adopting a fully open textbook to adding content to their Blackboard shell that they think would help students. So if you have questions along this process, know that as your colleagues, that's how we are here to help. We can help you navigate that. We can help answer those individual questions of, hey, here's a link to this thing, right? Can I use this? To how do I embed a film or a documentary in my Blackboard shell? How do I adopt this open textbook, or would this textbook be helpful for me? Any of those types of questions we can help answer. So with that, Monroe, great timing. I'm going to switch to my question slide, and yeah, in the spirit of that, kind of the rest of the time we can have some of those conversations, some of that discussion, and hopefully I'll be able to answer some of those questions. So Monroe, go ahead.
Sure. Well, thank you for this, Lauren. Lauren or Laurie, right?
Lauren, yeah.
Lauren, yes. Yes, I certainly am glad to see that you've got quite a bit of information from the library. And I use it. I'm an anatomy and physiology instructor, and I use the textbook, a variety of different textbooks now. Sure. But I'm glad to see that the students can go to the library, access the library, and get information so that they don't have to worry about paying for this. And this is just great. So that I mean, when they look at textbooks, they see $125 or $200, and they just want to know what is current. And I use current information to help them out, PowerPoint, videos, and so forth. So I'm going to be pointing out to my students what I've learned today from you. So thank you very much.
Absolutely. And if there's any time that we can talk through, if you want to know if there's any other resources that we can maybe help embed in your Blackboard shell or anything like that, please let me know. I'm happy to have those conversations.
Well, thank you so much.
Absolutely. What else? What are you thinking about? If you came here with kind of questions about the spring semester or specific questions about using OER, what are you thinking about?
Lauren, I just have a quick question. When you have a textbook through a publisher, like I do a customized textbook, and they're kind of a pain in the butt about me getting an extra copy just to put in the library. But is there a way you know, or that I could work with the publisher about making that more digital or online in some way as an open resource, or is it no because it's through them?
Yeah, no, because it's through them.
Okay. Okay. I'm excited the other way.
The one thing you could talk to them about is basically asking for permission or figuring out how much of the textbook you could share in your Blackboard shell.
Okay.
So that also could be a conversation of, again, especially because we are now, you know, majority online, talking to the publisher in the spring saying, you know, we're going to be mostly online. Most of my students, you know, may not be able to get to the library to physically access the textbook. And working with the publisher, if they'll allow you to share a few chapters in your Blackboard shell fully online, that could be a conversation that's worth having.
Okay, I know, because you know, specifically a lot of my stuff they can actually get online. It was just easier to keep their focus, you know, when they have it. All right, I'll talk to them. Thank you.
Yeah, and then what you just said reminded me really quickly, Rebecca, if they can, like if it's older readings that they can be accessed online, that might be something where you encourage them to purchase the textbook, but by, you know, the second week of class, for those students that may haven't, you can potentially link some of the readings in your Blackboard shell saying, hey, if you didn't purchase the textbook, here's a place where you can go to get the reading for this week. That could potentially be another way of doing it.
Yeah, it'll probably be easier this time around. When I was in person, they wouldn't access it online, but now they don't have a choice, so I have a captive audience.
Exactly, right. No, it's so true. The semester's changed a lot of behaviors for a lot of students and faculty, right? So yeah, if you need help, let me know. I can definitely help you link some stuff to spring.
Okay, thank you so much.
Yeah, Dave.
Yeah, me again. No, I think I appreciate this talk today, Lauren. And one of the things that occurs to me is maybe I wonder if I've been skating on thin ice. And I'll tell you what I mean. It's like I remember when we were doing the course development stuff, we had to find not just resources, but then give them attributions. And one thing I've not really been doing very well is if, say, I find a pesticide resource from, I don't know, Purdue University Extension, I'll put it on Blackboard and ask my students to read pages 4 through 8 as a supplement, you know, to our learning. Should I be on the Blackboard? A, should I not be posting it? And B, or if I am, should I be giving it like full attributions? Or what?
So, yeah, so the attribution fulfillment, like you are attributing if somewhere on the document it says where it's coming from. So if all the pages are completely blank and don't say anything about Purdue University, then that's a problem. But if there's like a cover page or something that says where it's from, or there's a footnote that says where it's from, then the attribution somewhere on there it says where it's from, so then your obligation for attribution is fulfilled. You don't necessarily have to put the full citation on your Blackboard shell. However, fulfilling your obligation and kind of best practice can be two different things sometimes. And so I would encourage you on your Blackboard shell right before students click on it to say, you know, here's this reading titled this from Purdue University. It doesn't have to be the full citation, but I think best practice of letting them know what they're reading right before they click in is helpful. Because sometimes it all just looks like PDFs, right? So I think that could be helpful, but as long as it says somewhere on the document where it came from, then you're not on thin ice.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you have any questions about like specific documents, feel free to send me an email and I can kind of look over and review and be like, yeah, no, it's open, you're good to go, or hey, you may want to double check on some of those things. I'm happy to do that.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Dave. We have about 10 minutes left together. Are there any other questions, thoughts, things you thought I would cover that I didn't today? Just because I didn't add it in the PowerPoint doesn't mean we can't talk about it. So anything else that you're thinking about, or again, as you're thinking about for spring and students accessing their course materials or learning materials, you know, in this fully online environment, kind of any questions or issues that are coming up for you. Jackie.
Lauren, I have no questions at this time. I think this was extremely helpful, but I could foresee me having questions in the future as I kind of play around with some of the different sites that you posted. So I might be reaching out to you at some point in the near future. But I want to thank you. This has been great.
To it. Great, thanks, Jackie. Yeah, I look forward to it, and I love helping faculty with this. So please do not be shy about reaching out via email. I'm here on campus, so you can reach me at my extension too. It's 3478. You can find me in the directory and everything. Also, I'm going to note really quickly who's here, and then I will also send out my deck. You're welcome, Anissa. I will send out my deck to everyone, and so you'll have all the links here, and then if you have any questions, again, feel free to follow up with that as well. All right, Rebecca and Selma. Okay, I've got everyone listed. Oh, Rebecca, you flatter me. That's coming from my favorite teacher on campus. All right, well, thank you, Shelley. So kind. I really appreciate you guys all coming. Thank you so much for spending some time with me this afternoon. And if I don't see or talk with you, because I feel like it happens so infrequently these days, have a great rest of your semester. Also, just as a side note, in my role as chair of the library, if you or your students need anything leading up to finals or during finals week, please point them to us. We still have hotspots, we still have laptops. So if you get the crazy, like I spilled coffee on my laptop and I can't take my, do my paper, or can't take my final, send them to us. We are happy. We still have plenty of hotspots, plenty of laptops to check out. So if your students need help being successful towards the end of the semester, point them to us and we'll be more than happy to help them out. Same thing goes for you. If you guys need anything, we want to make sure you guys can finish the semester strong. So with that, thank you so much. Take care, everyone. Have a great rest of the semester.